Welcome, Science and Magic listeners. I am so excited for our guest today. I have with us Nikki Gomez. She is a professional photographer, a model coach, and an angelic Reiki healer. I met Nikki in the past couple of years. I think we're in a book club together and met through a mutual friend. And I just remember being drawn to you right away, Nikki. So welcome to the show. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and the feeling is 100% mutual.
Yes, so good. So before we dive into kind of your brilliance and your unique offerings in the world, I always like to start these conversations from this perspective of who you are and how you came to be the person that you are. So I want to invite you to share anything from your upbringing or childhood that might help provide some context for our listeners as to how you came to be where you are today.
Sure. Well, I am from New York. I grew up in Yonkers, New York. And growing up, I had a bit of an unconventional childhood. My mother actually had me really young, and I didn't have my father in my life till I was about 9 years old. And unfortunately, he joined my life after a really tragic incident in which my stepfather died, and my mother began using drugs. And then, basically I grew up in a household with some drug addiction, domestic violence. And while that was all happening, I had more siblings come into the picture. So even at a very young age, I want to say from 9 through 14, I was basically like the live-in nanny / surrogate mother, not only to my siblings, but also to my parents. So a lot was going on, and I had to really grow up kind of fast. But I will say that during all of the chaos, I always had this sense that I was being protected and guided by some type of higher energy. And at the time, I called them my angels. And so I would talk to these angels and ask for help. And oddly enough, a lot of my prayers and my askings actually happened. And so I always felt like that was proof that there was this higher thing going on in this life of mine, and I had this connection to these angels with the absence of conventional religion. Right, I had just this natural connection to these angels, and I guess that connects to where I am today.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I remember when I learned this about you, some of your background, and I still got goosebumps when you just shared, because I also have some experience of my childhood growing up in a household with addiction and abuse. And I remember as a child, I would lay in bed and I would literally pray for angel wings. And when I heard your story, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I actually got angel wings. And I felt such a resonance with this part of your story, even though we obviously have different, experiences, but the general feeling of needing protection and seeking that protection from the unseen world and asking for that help, it's so powerful. So how would you describe, if someone's listening and they're like, what are angels? What does that feel like? What does that maybe look like or sound like? How would you describe this presence of angels?
I think because I'm a feeler, for me, it's less about what they look like. I really don't know what they look like beyond what, folklore says, right? For me, it's an energy of what they feel like. And so for me, it's this all-encompassing love. And when I say love, I mean the type of love that is unconditional, completely accepting, completely nurturing, just inexplicable acceptance of you. And that's, to me, what it feels like when they're present. And now that I kind of work with angels, I can identify a little bit of their different energetic signatures depending on which angel's around me. But the overall feeling is this like all-encompassing, beautiful love.
Wow. And you feel that through the body. Is that right? It's like a feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like when I think of that, or when I've experienced little touches of angels or divine guidance, it's almost like I get little goosebumps everywhere, or like tingles up and down my spine. And I know some people are more connect with that realm through visuals or through hearing, I think it's really important, for our listeners also to know that we all connect to divine guidance in our own unique ways. And one of the things that I love about you is that you're so passionate about not only relaying messages about angels to others, but helping others find their own connection with divine guidance. So what would you suggest to listeners who are kind of curious, but not quite sure? Like, how do I connect with spirits or angels, or what would you suggest for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best explanations I've gotten as far as like how people see or feel things differently, it's almost like take your natural I'm sorry, like my mind is, I'm so calm from meditation today. I swear I meditated like an hour and a half before we spoke. So I'm like, more meditation. But take your human senses, your regular physical senses, whatever sense you already are using more of or work with or are heightened in. So let's say, for instance, you have a great musical ear. You might be able to actually hear the sound frequency change when angels are in the room, because your hearing is already developed and being used. For instance, when I was working in music, most of my whole childhood was music. Like I was an artist, but like I was all about singing. And from age 2, I was like, I'm going to be a singer. And so I started to hear sound frequency changing. I started to hear, disembodied voices, right? So like all of these paranormal things would come through that sense. And then as I developed more as a photographer, I started to see different things. So flashes of light, or having dreams, or getting like, perceptions of images in my mind that would give me information. So really it's dependent upon what senses do you normally use in your everyday life the most, and more likely that's the way you can tap in and sense these extrasensory things.
Yes. Yeah, I think like leaning into mystery, and that's part of what this podcast holds, is yes, we have scientists on the podcast, then we're also open to having conversations about what does it mean for things not to make this logical sense. And I think there's so many people out there who maybe are listening who are like, oh, I'm definitely an audio person. Like I can hear, or leaning into that intuitive sense of how you connect with the unseen reality, if that's something that intrigues you, can be really powerful. It's a felt sense of knowing without knowing. And it's so beautiful that you shared that. Like the sense is already there. You know it, lean into it a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say, just to add to that, most of my perception and understanding of all of these things is that it is science. It may not be conventional science that we've already learned. I believe it's a science that we're going to continue to learn as we develop and grow as humans. So what we're going to realize is that things aren't as physical necessarily as we were taught. We're going to see that, frequency and energy and all of that, they're going to have a lot more explanation to them as time goes on that connects to these things that we think are mystical. They're actually probably a lot more tangible than we've been taught.
Yes, 100%. And I always, it was funny. I was invited to be on a panel a couple of years ago about energy medicine. And I'm not an energy medicine practitioner, so I was very confused. But they said, we like how you share about energy from the perspective or the lens of science and nervous system. And how I talk about energy is that the nervous system is emitting electricity always. Like our heartbeat right now is pumping. That's electricity. The way that our thoughts are moving in our brain is conducting electricity. And with that electricity comes a magnetic field that's around the body. Just like electricity travels through a wire, so does it travel through the body. And so some people are more kind of naturally in tune with this energy. Some people, everyone has access to it. But I think understanding that like kind of bridges this, well, it's not just woo woo, there's something to this. And there's something to that we have shared experiences of energy. So I know for Science and Magic, on occasion, you channel messages from Archangel Michael.
Yes.
And I'm curious who Archangel Michael is and what this process of channeling feels like, looks like how do you channel a message from an unseen divine guide?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to try to think of the best way to describe this. Because, sometimes it's things that you do and you're just like, I don't even know how to tell you how I did that. I will say, when it comes to the angels, I purposely release a lot of the religion that goes behind them, right? So some people will be like, oh, that's strictly Catholic or strictly Christian. And I just release that because I think of them as energetic beings. And so in my understanding of Archangel Michael, he is the angel of truth. And he's also the angel you call upon when you need protection. And usually if you ask for his protection, he's basically there for you forever, protecting you. And so I started to sense his energy when I decided to become an angelic Reiki healer. And so he's one of the angels I do have to call upon for protection when I'm doing the practice with my clients. And it's funny because his energy, we say protection, I guess the best way I could describe it, it's like not just your dad in the most loving, protecting way coming to like get your back, but like your dad, your grandpa, your great grandpa, like every possible male authoritative protective energy that you can think of, right? So I didn't actually have too much of that in my life. I had my grandfather who was a great protector and very loving, but as far as father figures, I didn't really have that. So I don't necessarily like putting that label of father on it, but that's the best way I could describe is this masculine, but still very loving and nurturing, protective energy. And so whenever he's around me, I feel one, strong and like, no one can get past this. Like, you're not going to fool me. I see the truth. Like all of these things just like come into the energy field when he enters the room. And then on top of that, he brings me information. So I think the best way I feel it as is because he has this protective energy and because I've asked for that guidance and protection and truth and I'm open, he's willing to give me information that therefore I'm allowed to share. So about whatever we're all asking for, whatever we're all needing at this time. And a lot of us actually ask for similar things at the same time. And so he's kind of like, okay, you asked for this. Everybody needs to know. They're all asking. Here's the info. And that's kind of what ends up happening with the channeled information is that I'm basically in meditation and I'm trying to just tap into his energy because I know he's around. And then he goes, okay, well, now that you're open, here's all the info for you and share it with everybody. And I go, okay. And then when I share my message, I don't know if you can tell, I don't write anything out. Like I just basically surrender. So during a taping, I just say, okay, the stuff that you kind of told me before, let's get into detail and let's share it. And then I feel that energy and it's almost like it just comes out of me. And it's less about what I think and what I feel and more about what needs to be heard or said.
Surrender, it sounds like. Very powerful. When you're channeling, do you have any rituals around what that looks like or any environments where you feel like you can connect to that energy in a deeper way?
For me, meditation is always a necessity when I want to channel. Meditation, breathing is very important for me. And then honestly, like I've made my home pretty much a haven for angels. So like it's as peaceful and welcoming and calming of an energy as I could create so that no matter what, like they know it's cool. They can come and like hang out and give whatever information or bring whatever energy needs to be brought. So I feel like my environment is very important for that because I've always dreamed of having a very peaceful environment and I've always longed for it. And now I've created it.
Can I come over to your haven of angels?
Any day.
That sounds so relaxing. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
So I kind of want to bring it back to your childhood when you first connected with the angels. And I feel like when we're children, we're even in some ways more open to this divine guidance or the imagination realm.
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment that you first recognized, or was it an essence of, oh, when I look back, the angels were always there? Or was there a specific moment?
It's hard to say. Like, I feel like it's probably more of like an overall, like, I know they were always there.
Mm.
But there's this one moment that does come to mind often, and I hope it's not in any way triggering, because it is going to bring up potential abuse, but thankfully it didn't happen. And I think part of it is because of the angels. So there was a moment where my father was yelling at my little brother. And at this point, I was very protective over him. And I stood up for my brother, and it took all of my strength to do that, because my father was scary to me. And I ran up and I was like, no, blah, 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 he's not, da, da, da. And, I just really like fought, and kind of dug my heels in the ground, like, no. And I was maybe 10 years old or something. And my father saw red, and I saw him see red, and he chased me. And I ran to our childhood bedroom, and I ran into the closet. And at the time we had like a pile of clothes in there. So I like laid on the clothes and put my hands up. And when I put my hands up, I saw him, and it was as if he froze. He was basically stuck in this position of like, I'm going to hit you. But he didn't. He just didn't. And to this day, I don't know what stopped him. And I don't know what it was. The only thing I can feel in my, sixth sense or whatever is that something intercepted that moment. Something stopped him. And that for me is validation that there was something else there to protect me, that added to the belief of angels. Like, there's no other explanation in my mind as to why he would hit anyone else in my family and not me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that you had to experience that fear as a child. None of that is fair. And I'm glad that you were protected in some way, even if it doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah.
It brought up a story for me when I had a similar presence of being paused. I was about to cross the road as a child, and I was in between cars, and I remember I tried to step and I couldn't step. Something like held me back, and in that flash of an instant, a car drove past. And I always look back, and I was like, there was some unseen force, because I was trying to cross the road and I couldn't. It was like an invisible field. Mm-hmm. And that's what that reminded me of like, like that action being paused somehow. And
yeah. And then looking back on it, it looks like that. It looks like someone hit the remote control and hit pause.
Yes. Wow. So you are a empathic soul counselor. Is that correct?
Yes.
So share about what this offering looks like. How do you show up as an empathetic soul counselor?
Sure. So for me, a lot of that has to do with the understanding that whatever it is that we do in our lives, however we operate, whatever it is that we like, how we just do things, right? That there's actually a purpose and a reason for it. So unfortunately in our society, we're taught to correct all the time. Like, you should be more like them, or you should be more like that's the right way to be, or, because you're not a morning person, you need to fix that, or, but in actuality, there's probably a bigger purpose to the way you operate. And there's probably a beneficial advantage to embracing the way that you work and adapting your life to that. And so a lot of what I do with empathic soul counseling is, let's get into it. Let's get into the things that make you feel inadequate and wrong and like you're a failure and all of these things. And let's analyze the way you actually work. And let's see if we can embrace and accept the way that you are, so that you can then fulfill your life's purpose in this incarnation. So that's a really big part of what I do, is if you feel like you're ready to fulfill whatever that purpose is in this incarnation, why not take the steps to doing that instead of fighting who you naturally are here in this world?
Thank goodness you're doing that work, because I get so fired up about offering spaces for people to express their unique brilliance. We are all conditioned that we should act or approach life or our work in a certain way. And I love that you're holding space for the unique expression of energy and souls to come through just as they are.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you another bigger question. How would you describe soul? And just because, we host space here for both those who are more science leaning and those who are more into magic. And some listeners might not have an understanding of what's a soul? How would you describe that, knowing that it is a different experience for every being?
I love that question. I just want to ruminate on that for a while. I think that for me, a soul is your essence. It's the natural part of you before you're told to be something else, right? So for instance, I try to, even when I'm doing empathic soul counseling, when I'm working with my clients, I'm try to travel back to childhood and the things that you just loved to do naturally before someone was that's weird, or, you're wasting time, or you got to think about a career. Before anyone stopped you and tried to mold you into what they thought you should be, that essence of who you were and what you loved is your soul. That's the same thing that if you believe in reincarnation, that essence is going to go to the next life, or it came with you from the previous life. And so a lot of the work that I do is getting back to that before you thought you were wrong and weird, or whatever it is that society says is up with you. So for example, I've always been a daydreamer and her head's in the clouds and she's daydreaming again, or she's imagining things, or whatever it is. And it's no, that if I embraced my soul's essence as a daydreamer without the negative connotation, I would have accepted that I was an artist way younger than I actually did as an adult. And so that to me is the soul. And I think that as we're incarnated in whatever lifetime we're in right now, we have the opportunity to get back to that, to shed all of the expectations and, the parts of us that are projections from other people, and get back to our essence and truly embrace who we are so that we can do all of the things that we want to do. I think a lot of the fear that we have is when we're told we should be a certain way and we don't feel like that. And then we're trying so hard to be that thing, that we never become who we really want to be. And to me, that's sad, right? Let's become who we want to be, who we know we are.
I'm imagining and feeling into a world right now where everyone can express their own unique soul resonance without feeling pressured to be a certain way or follow a certain path. And it just feels like such a good energy. My Aquarius sun sign loves that energy.
I love it. To me, that would be the definition of freedom.
Yes, 100%. So when someone works with you in this way, as an empathic soul counselor, is it a series of one-on-one sessions, or is it in a group, or do you have programs?
Right now it's one-on-one sessions. It's not something that I advertise very often. I really feel like finding the right client in the right situation and the right timing is probably best for that. But yeah, eventually I might look into some type of group stuff or some type of media sharing where I share tips and information and insights into that philosophy.
On your Instagram page, I was kind of browsing through to refresh pre this call, but I was noticing that you hosted an event called Child Free Rallies.
Yeah, I'm actually a guest. I was a guest at this.
Okay. You were a guest. Well, this was so interesting because it's intended for individuals who have made this conscious decision not to have children, correct?
Yes.
To kind of connect and fully embrace manifesting their life. And as women especially, I feel like there's a lot of societal pressure to have kids, our worth is intimately tied in with it or something. Not that there's anything wrong with having them. Of course, children are beautiful, but there feels to be this pressure that I experience as well. And when, talking about unique soul essences and conditioning and things, I was curious if you would be open to kind of speaking more about this decision of yours not to have kids, which you did share on social media. So I'm not just spilling the beans or something, and how that decision has kind of impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, now that I've shared a bit of my childhood, part of my childhood, a big part of it was being a mom. Like, I wasn't just a big sister. Like, I was the one who woke up at 3 a.m. and changed the diapers and made the bottles and missed school and took care of my brothers and took them with me to the grocery store. Like, all of the things that a parent would do, I had to do in that situation, very, very young. And so I remember hanging out with my really close girlfriends when I was like 11, 12, and they'd be like, when I grow up, I want to be a mom and I want to do this. I can't wait to have kids. And they'd be like, Nikki, what are your dreams? And I'd be like, I don't want kids. Like, I just knew at that point in my life that like my future was going to be more about doing the things that I love to do and traveling and just having more of a adventurous lifestyle for myself. Again, not that there's anything unadventurous about being a parent, but that wasn't for me, and I already knew it, and I declared it very young. And so because of that, and yes, there have been times in my adult life where I'm like, maybe I do want kids, or maybe this would be the right person to have kids with, because the expectation was already on me from other people. So once I was able to isolate how I feel versus how other people think I should live, I realized, oh yeah, no, that 12-year-old version of me, she's still very much in charge and she still very much does not want to be a mom. And so like, I'm going to embrace that truth because that's true for me. And I'm going to live the life I've dreamt of. And so to me, that means, being able to take a grant to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma at the drop of a dime, and being able to spend a summer in Minnesota at the drop of a dime, and, and travel and live the life that I want to live.
This is why it's just so important, I think, to take time to connect into your heart, into your intuition, to reflect, to do kind of personal development, self-development work. Because when you take the space and the time and have, guidance, if that's what you seek, to ask yourself some of these questions and tune in with your own resonance, can be really, really helpful to navigate in a way and consciously create a life that is truly from your own desires.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. You have I was really drawn to this phrase that you posted on your website. Your limits only exist in your beliefs, and beliefs are prisons for the mind. And this is a quote that looks like it's from you as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a big, bold phrase as you're scrolling through your website. And I love it because I'm all about exploring limiting beliefs. So can you expand on why you chose to post that quote and what it means to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's also a reminder in communication with people, especially as I'm discussing my journey in spirituality and with healing. And I kept saying these words, in my belief, and I thought that at one point was the best way to communicate that to someone without putting my opinion on them. And the more I did that, the more my insides started to kind of cringe. And my insides cringed because it was like, yeah, and you believe something totally different 5 years ago, and you believe something totally different 10 years ago, and you thought you were right about all of those things, and of course, like, as we evolve and grow and mature as people, our beliefs shift. And so that word belief is so rigid when you're communicating with people that it's best to kind of say, okay, you know what? I'm going to release this belief because in 5 years, I might think something totally different. And instead, I'm going to say, well, in my experience, from my perception at this point, right, this is what I see. This is what I am going through, as opposed to like, this is the belief, right? So that was one of the reasons I put that there. And also because perception is reality, and we all go through so many different realities because we have different experiences. And I think if anything, 2020 was the biggest eye-opener to that, right? Is we are all living in separate realities because we all have separate experiences and separate perceptions. And we need to become more compassionate and patient and kind and caring for people, everyone, all of us, each other, going through all these experiences, and realize that we can't project our own beliefs onto other people.
So good. Beliefs are prisons for the mind. I always say to clients that I work with that we have billions of different neurons in our brain that connect in trillions of different ways. So we could be looking at the exact same thing and are probably having an entirely different neurochemical experience, like physiologically in our brain. Mm-hmm. And when we think of beliefs, beliefs are wired into our brain from all of our experiences, everything we've experienced, all of our conditioning. And a belief, when it is so rigid, it can create a lot of friction with someone else. So I love this shift in words around my perception in this moment, where my experience is, because it softens some of that friction and there's less of I'm trying to prove you wrong and more of this is my truth and you have your truth. And this is why I do my best when having conversations around anything, and especially something as intimate and kind of unseen or personal spirituality, of this is my experience and how I experience the divine or the angels or my body. And you may experience that in a different way, and having space for that.
Yeah. And I will say, like, don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to add, like, you're one of the best examples of someone who is cognitively aware of how to communicate with people. And I've always admired that about you. And I think in some ways it's always been an inspiration to me as well to continue on that path, because you're very aware of what you're saying to people when you're saying it to them. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. And it's continuing to be an inspiration.
Wow. Thank you for that compliment. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And I've always been so responsive to your warm energy. You do have this really heart-centered, empathic energy where you are, I feel like, connecting to souls. And even, we're in COVID. I think we met digitally before in person.
We did.
And we were on this call with, 30 people or something. And I kept being drawn to you because you were so present on Zoom. And I was just kind of over Zoom at that point. It was in the beginning when we all went in deep with Zoom. And I just remember being so present with your presence and your energy and the way that you were with us all without being there in person.
Thank you.
And it was incredible. And I suggest anyone who's interested in working with Nikki, or even has that intrigue, to look her up after this show and try out a session, because she gives you her full attention. And like this, of course you live in a safe haven of angels. Like, of course you do. Your energy is so warm. So good. So a lot of the offerings that I share in the world center around embodiment, leaning into and connecting with the mechanisms and the intelligence of the bodies that we're in this lifetime or this reincarnation, if that's how we experience it. So I know that you've been in the fashion industry for 17 years.
Yeah.
As a photographer, as a model representative, and a model yourself. So I wonder if you might share anything in regards to what you've uncovered about your relationship to your body in this lifetime through that industry, or any other way that you would want to share. But
yeah, what a great question. I love all these questions.
I told you, I was like, I can't pick.
I love it. So for me, even getting into the fashion industry, I wasn't ready. I didn't grow up thinking, I'm going to be a model or anything. If anything, I had this really weird dream of being a hand model, but that's a different story. So I just didn't, it was not on my radar. It wasn't something I planned for. And it was actually when I was at probably my biggest at the time, as far as dress size, I was my biggest, I was my heaviest. I was getting approached by strangers in the street, and not just in a, like, I want to date you way, but like in a, wow, you're really beautiful, you should think about modeling. And this is back in the early 2000s. So I was like, what model is a size 18? Like, what are you talking about? And it was from men and women and all different people. And so I was like, okay, maybe I need to do some research, like, because clearly there must be something going on that I'm not aware of. And there was a magazine out in print at the time. called Mode magazine. And at the time it represented model sizes 8 and up. And to me, that was groundbreaking. And it was the bodies like mine and my mom and like the other women in my family. And I'm seeing curves and hips and all of these things celebrated and dressed beautifully. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is something I didn't even know existed. And so there was a model search. And so I entered the model search for Wilhelmina models and got to go to the open call and the whole nine. I did not get picked, but I did meet so many beautiful women that, you know, were all different shapes and sizes. And I was just inspired. And so I took a few months. I got into better shape. I was still plus size. I was like a 14, 16. And then I submitted myself to a website, which at the time was before, you know, Facebook and all that stuff. And it was a website just for plus models. And I put my information out there and I got, I think, 10 pages on a thread of feedback, positive. Like, do it. You need to do it. You need to do it. Someone DM'd me and told me about an agency having an open call. And I walked in and I was signed on the spot. And so that's how it all began. And from that point on until this day, it's been my mission to make sure that there are more images of diverse beauty represented in the media. And one of, like, yes, it's easy to do that as a model, but it's also been my mission to create those images because I'm a creative and I'm an artist and I taught myself photography. And so I took my talent as a photographer and dedicated most of my life to creating these images of women of all shapes and sizes and basically high quality and dressed beautifully and just saying, look, there's more than one standard of beauty. There's more than one body type in the world that we should be looking at and celebrating. There's more than one hair type, skin color, all of that. And so, yeah, that's my way of being like, yeah, this is the body I'm in this life. And even when I'm thin, I'm still curvy. And so I am celebrating all of that. And I want to take you all along with me for the ride.
I love your messaging around body positivity.
Thank you.
I just had a few months ago, I was a model for a portrait photography workshop, and the images weren't taken in a traditional fashion sense. And I think, you know, in female bodies, we're used to seeing our bodies emulated in certain ways with certain curvature, sexualized. And I think that the female body is beautiful, and I don't think sexuality is wrong, but that's the only way that I was used to seeing female bodies. So I would look at some of these images that were more portrait focused, where I wasn't shown in that way. I was showing very much in this human form, like woman in the wild. And I had this hard time with some of them because of the conditioning around how we see bodies.
Yeah.
And I just found that fascinating. And my work is to be embodied as much as possible too. And I love my body, but to see the images from the outside in, I'm like, oh, am I still beautiful right now? The beauty was a true question I was asking myself.
Yeah.
And so this vision you have, it's very inspiring.
Thank you. A lot of our perception of what beauty is based on the male gaze. And so it's helps to have creatives that are female, because we can dismantle the male gaze and show what is naturally beautiful without it being one standard of what they think it should be. Just like, for instance, when I shoot lingerie, I shoot models in lingerie, I'm not shooting them in a sexual way. So there's no, like, you can take one model in the same outfit and have a male photographer, you know, who is, you know, cis and all that stuff, shoot her, and then have a female photographer shoot her, and you're going to have a totally different outcome. And it's mostly because, you know, most men are trained on the male gaze. Actually, most of society is. There's women trained in the same male gaze, as you mentioned. So we have to kind of dismantle it a little bit and show like the natural beauty of the form without it being just about sexualized perfection or what is perceived as perfection, right? The more we do that, the more we start to normalize all different beauty and all different bodies and all different shapes. And yeah.
100%. And it made me reflect on what sort of content I'm intaking, because when you think of that, when you're receiving content, there's certain neural pathways that are firing in response to that content. And so because I've only been intaking content of the female body from a male gaze, I didn't have a lot of pathways for any other imagery. And I just wonder what might happen if I take in other content of human form, just in general, and what that might do.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's the same conversation I have with people around social media. So many people take the perception that social media is toxic. And while it can be, you can also create a world in your social media that is reflective of different information, like you said, that can hit your neural pathways in a different way. So, for instance, a lot of the people and the accounts that I follow are body acceptance. And I don't mean just body positive, I mean body acceptance. So whatever the body is or wherever point that person is in their life, they're celebrating it. And it's all over my feed because that's what I focus on. So between that and like home decor and like recipes of, healthy food, like my social media is pretty healthy because it really is more about healthy living and healthy, expression of self, and less about perfection. I don't believe in perfection. Like I break it down all the time. I'm like, F perfection, it doesn't exist. It's all about authenticity. So that's more of what my social media is reflective of.
Authenticity. A call to curate our social media feeds.
Yes, do it. Go through and get rid of all the nonsense and then, make a perfect world that makes you happy. And I hate to use the word perfect. Make an ideal world with healthy authenticity.
Yeah. Well, so you are also a photographer. And
Yes.
what are some ways that you might help your clients feel comfortable in their own bodies in front of a camera? Besides just your amazing energy, is there anything that you try to tune into or?
Honestly, I think it helps that I've been in front of the camera for so long. And so there's just a natural way about, directing people that makes them feel comfortable. I disarm them a little bit by being me. And so I'm just goofy and like, we're here to, literally most of my clients describe it as like hanging out with a girlfriend and just playing dress up. Like that's pretty much what it's like for me. And so I make it fun, and in making it fun, it's less about thinking about exactly like how you look and more about, okay, like this is a feeling we can convey. Oh, you're a confident woman. Yes. What does confidence look like? And then we snap into that and the chin goes up and the shoulders go back. And, it's more of that and less about, oh, maybe your skirt is cutting you here. No, if it is, I'll get up and I'll help you fix it. And then we'll just get back into having fun. It's not about highlighting your imperfections or whatever it is that people start thinking about on a photo shoot. And it's more about, let's just have fun and get these images that show you as you.
Yeah. And it's less about the pose.
Yeah.
And
I don't believe in posing.
yeah. And like holding, because I know for me, if I'm not comfortable in an environment or with a photographer, especially in this past experience of mine, you could tell in my face, like I'm not trained enough to relax my face if I'm not comfortable. And so the photos you take are beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love looking through them. It's clear that your clients, that those you work with, are at ease, and that's such a gift to offer someone.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of it is just that. It's the connection. It's the building of just a relationship. And oftentimes in the moment, because I work from an intuitive aspect, so it's less for me technical and a lot more feely. And so like when I am like working with you, I'm going to get images in my head based upon things that you say and the way that you're making me feel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this person may have this like nurturing, beautiful, loving energy. Okay, I want to shoot her in that way. And that's what we capture. So it's definitely a lot more organic and free flowing. And I think that helps as well during the shoot.
Yeah, it's getting out of the logical mind, it sounds like, as well, and into a sense of emotions and embodiment.
Yes, that's the best. That's the best way to describe it. And oftentimes I catch myself talking to my clients and saying, okay, let's get out of your head. Like, what are you feeling right now? Or like, or where would you wear this outfit to? And okay, sometimes I get images in my mind that are goals of theirs before they tell me them. And so, like, for instance, one of my last shoots, this amazing woman is embarking on this new journey where she's sharing a medical condition she's going through and how she's coming out of it. And she's writing a book and she's doing all that. I did not know about the book at all. And I literally said to her, this looks like the back of your book cover. And she goes, I'm writing a book. And so it just snaps in with the intuition and the connection. And I think that is really what happens for most of my photo shoots.
It's such a perfect example of how our connection to our bodies and our intuition can be brought into our career, even if our career isn't necessarily in the healing realm. Like your angelic gifts are in the healing realm. And I would argue that your photography is definitely as well. But traditionally, when we think of photography, we're not like, we're healing through the act of taking pictures. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a deep respect for the art of photography, but you get what I'm saying, how like
the general idea.
Yes. And that you can bring those gifts of intuition and embodiment to a career field, no matter what that career field is, and deepen your relationships within them.
Yeah, I love that. And that also ties back into what the empathic soul counseling is. It's basically like, let's embrace all of the things that are you, because that's probably going to lead into your career and into all the things that you want to do. And a lot of times the reason why we don't do the things that we're always dreaming of is because we're so afraid, because we think it's wrong based on other people's ideas. So once you start embracing all of your gifts, all of your talents, it comes out. And you live a more fulfilled existence through your career path, through your home, through all of the aspects that make you, you.
Were you nervous to share your gift of angelic channeling?
I was nervous to share all of this, everything. I remember even embracing the creative side of myself and my partner looking at me and saying, you're an artist. And I broke down in tears. Like I didn't even know how to live the life of what I was. I always believed and thought and was conditioned to believe that I had to work in finance and I had to like make six figures doing something, that was just like a normal job. And so the realization of all that I am and then starting to embrace it has been a journey. And it's a journey that I love and I'm so excited for. And the more that I do it, the more I manifest the life I've always dreamt of. And I'm just grateful that one day I was like, okay, I'm going to put up a YouTube video about spirituality. And, I was scared and I thought people were going to think I was crazy. But those YouTube videos led me to, you essentially, because it was someone that saw that and said, hey, be my friend. And hey, these are my other friends. And it's like, oh, okay. So the more that you do that, the more that you embrace all those things that are you, even if it's woo woo or cuckoo or whatever you want to call it, it just opens doors.
I think it's so helpful for many people to hear these stories because it is scary when you feel like you're being different than the world that you've grown up in, no matter what that thing is. Yeah. And it's nerve-wracking, and yet it can be very liberating to step into that. And having support and having, whether it's friends around you or a coach or, a therapist, even an advocate of some sort to be with you as you step into these gifts, it can feel very freeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
On your website, you share your story about recovering from a life-threatening aneurysm. So you indicate that on some level, you knew that this aneurysm was linked to overwhelming stress that you were experiencing on a daily basis. And, post-recovery, fast forward to today, I'm curious if you have any practices that help you care for your nervous system. I work with a lot of high achievers, high performers. That's kind of my niche. And they also experience high amounts of stress. So perhaps your sharing around that discovery will help spark some ideas for them.
Yeah. Meditation and breathing are a big part of my life. And I joke around, I tell people, if I start getting snappy with people, it's because I haven't meditated. I know oops, okay, gotta get back into meditation. Something's wrong. So, yes, that's a big part of it. I will say that in hindsight, when I look back at that time, right before the aneurysm, I was putting myself in a situation where I wasn't honoring my energy, where I was living a life in comparison to what other people do. So for instance, I was in New York City, I was working in the fashion industry, I was working at a wonderful agency as an agent. And while I'm grateful for that time and that position, I was not listening to the fact that I was burning myself out and that I was overworked and I was exhausted. And I didn't know how to communicate that in a way that would relieve some of that pressure, because in my mind, it was like, oh, if other people can do it, you can do it too. Suck it up. Suck it up, Nikki. What's wrong with you? Why are you being so weak? And it's only after the fact I can look back and go, okay, that was not aligned for me. And every time I went home and I was venting, I was literally spewing out this energy that I ingested that was not mine, that was no longer fitting my body and my energy, because I was trying to hold it all in for so long to do all of these things. But to me, that was eroding me from the inside. And it took my body going, what is all of this? Like, we have to reject this. You need to stop, for me to make that shift and realize that that wasn't the life for me. So I think a lot of times that self-check-in is really important. If you find yourself complaining on a daily basis, going home miserable, not wanting to go to work, whatever it is, if you can shift that in your life, whether it's a perspective change, whether it's an hours change, whatever room you have to shift it, or if you're going to just leave and go after something you want to do and you're ready for that, then do it. Whatever you need to do, do it, because you don't want to wait for, me and Brie joke around the metaphysical 2x4. You don't want to wait for that, like, boop in the head, like, oops, like now you have no choice but to change things. And so that's what I went through until literally the aneurysm was that 2x4 and said, it's time for a shift.
What was the Nikki before the aneurysm and the Nikki now? Like, what was the day-to-day? What were the feelings you were feeling, or like in your body, in your mind, like kind of paint a picture of like the before and after?
I love this question. Your questions are so reflective, and I like that it helps me dive into that again, and it makes me more grateful for now. So for me, I feel like I was always struggling against myself. Like, I was always, and I didn't realize it. Of course, you're not necessarily conscious of that, but it always felt like I'm not a morning person, but I have to have jobs where I have to leave my house at 6:30 in the morning. I love creating and art, yet I have to have jobs where I have no expression of creativity. And so I was always going against the grain. I was always fighting myself and feeling exhausted and unfulfilled. And I never even wanted to get used to money when I was making good money. Like, I purposely did not want to buy the things that I could buy to upgrade my life, because I was certain that that wasn't meant to be my life. And so that constant struggle was always there, combined with a city that is, normalizes struggle, that normalizes rushing and stress. And so, yeah, that's what it was like to be me. It was just this constant, like, okay, I have to do other things on the side, maybe, to be the expression of what I really want to be. And that's how come I started modeling 17 years ago. I was working in finance, and then I was moonlighting as a model, because I had to have something else to do other than sit at a desk and, do Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah. And then fast forward now, the feeling is every day in general. I mean, of course, there's good and bad days still. Yeah. But what's the felt sense now as you approach your career?
Oh, my general sense is really happy. Like, I am really happy, and every day is different. And I used to say that too. I used to say, I don't care if I have to do 5 things in one day to make a living, as opposed to sitting one place all day long. I will do it. And so my life is very much reflective of that hope that I could do multiple things. And so yeah, there's like, today I'm on a podcast with you, and later on I have a call with the New York Times, and like, I had a meeting yesterday, and like all of these things are constantly shifting. Some days I'm talking to my coaching clients, some days I'm editing photos, some days I'm on a photo shoot, some days I'm healing with my clients. So this is way more my speed, because it also allows me the flexibility to be still and to choose days that like I just meditate, or, I draw, or I watch TV, like really bad reality shows for all day, and whatever I need, I will do. And because I give myself that space, there's room for inspiration. There's room for, starting new projects. Like, it's a lot less rigid.
When I hear people who are kind of stuck in a career that doesn't resonate with them, the word that's often used is soul sucking. And when I hear your story, what I'm hearing is that you were in a job position where you couldn't feel like that essence you were talking about was able to be expressed. If that essence and your definition or like experience of the soul can't be expressed, and that it's interesting, it just like came together as like that could be soul sucking. So when you take away these beliefs that life has to look a certain way and you step into your expression, your soul has room to grow. And that comes through, that realization can come through a lot of ways, right? It can come by, what'd you say, the 2x4? Like
the metaphysical 2x4.
Yeah, the metaphysical 2x4. It can also, be entered in a preventative way by taking the time to reflect and be in the body and seek, guidance or expansion by others who are doing the work to let their soul be expressed. So thank you for sharing that story. It inspires me every time I hear stories like this about people being brave enough to follow what's in their heart. I think we need more of that.
Yeah, and I love that you said soul sucking. I used to say it was a soul death, like my soul was dying, and I had to save it.
Mm-hmm. Thank goodness you did.
Thanks.
So if listeners want to connect with you, where can they do so?
My Instagram. So I have 2 Instagrams, although I think I'm going to be making them one. So let's just go with the Nikki Gomez. That is the best way, because I'm going to be basically embracing all of what I am on my main page, as well as I'm revamping my website, but it's also the nikkigomez.com. So it's still live right now. It has photography. And if you want to see my spiritual site prior to the merge, it is umasgayahealing.com for that as well. So yeah, and you can always email me. I love email. It's nikkigomez66@gmail.
Wonderful. And we'll link all of that below. I love that you're combining all of your offerings.
It's time. Yeah.
It's time. And things that could listeners book a photography session with you, or what are some of the offerings that you share with the public?
Yeah, I'm still holding on to the virtual photography for people that do want to do virtual photography. But if you want an in-person photo shoot, I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So if you're in the Tulsa area, I'd love to set something up with you. If you're an aspiring model and you've always been curious about the industry, or if you've already started modeling and want to advance your career and accelerate the timeline, you can also reach out to me for that. Energy healing work. If you need angelic reiki, I can do it virtually. I also started doing group offerings. So if you want to get a group together and all have angelic reiki session virtually, I can do that as well. So I'm the empathic soul counseling. So all of that is pretty much what I offer and love to do.
Thank you so much for your beautiful soul and for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, love. I'm so happy to have shared all of this with you and your listeners today.